Hi, everyone. Good morning. Um, it's 11 a.m., so we're going to begin. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kay Ugwede. I'm the features editor at TechCabal. This live webinar today, we're going to be discussing the future of payments in Nigeria with insights from Zone's recently launched reports titled Nigeria Payment Reports 2025. So we're just going to spend the next few minutes doing some introductions. First, the reports, which has been produced in collaboration with TechCabal Insights. The report delves into the evolution of Nigeria's payments landscape over the past 2 decades, highlighting the various events that have shaped the sector and the future outlook for payments in Nigeria. For those who don't know, TechCabal speaks to the business and human impact of tech and innovation in Africa through high-quality stories, reports, and events such as this one. We also publish the TechCabal Daily Newsletter, which is a comprehensive roundup of tech news and events across Africa. So if you're not signed up to that, please make sure to subscribe with the link posted in the chat room so you can get that delivered to your inbox every weekday morning. This event is organized by TechCabal Insights in partnership with Zone and the Fintech Association of Nigeria. TechCabal Insights is the events research and data analytics arm of TechCabal. The team is an Africa-focused digital economy consultancy that leverages big data to help startups, innovators, operators, big tech companies, governments, and other ecosystem players on and off the continent to answer specific questions and implement key interventions. Zone, one of our collaborators for this event, is a regulated blockchain network that enables payments and acceptance of digital currencies. With an initial focus on Africa, Zone enables banks and fintech startups to bypass intermediaries and connect directly with each other to enable real-time processing and settlement of digital payments in fiat currencies. And then our second collaborator for this event, the Fintech Association of Nigeria, is a platform for the development of Nigeria's fintech industry and a forum for the exchange of ideas and dissemination of information by and between various stakeholders in the Nigerian fintech industry. Today we have 4 panelists who are going to be discussing this report with us and sharing their insights. And I'll just introduce them briefly and then share with us how the event is going to run before we go on with the rest of the items on the agenda. So the first person who's joining us today is Francis Ogbuka, who is the VP of Sales and Business Development at Zone. Francis is a seasoned technology sales leader with over 13 years of experience and spearheads business development efforts that drive sales-led growth across fintech, payments, and blockchain industries. With a wealth of experience in institutional, enterprise, and mid-market sales, he excels in building strategic client partnerships and leading cross-functional teams to achieve sustained revenue growth. Francis is an influential voice in the fintech community and has spoken at prominent industry events where he shares his insights on the future of payments, blockchain, and financial technology across Africa. Our second panelist today is Malik Asamu, who is the co-founder and CEO of CashAfrica. CashAfrica is a fintech powerhouse transforming contactless payments across Africa. With a mission to replace lengthy and hard-to-use payment systems, CashAfrica provides seamless 1-second tap-to-pay solutions integrated directly into bank and fintech apps, redefining the digital payments experience. Malik has a background spanning software development and financial services, and has led CashAfrica to impressive partnerships with Sterling Bank, PalmPay, Hydrogen, Zenith, and UBA. CashAfrica has so far processed billions in transactions. Our next speaker, our next panelist for this event is Iphie Jide-Ebeogu, who is the payments expert with 13 years of experience in the fintech industry. She has excellent knowledge of payment technology, cards, and protocols focused on the B2B and B2B2C domains. She's currently the founder and managing partner of the PaymentLogue, which is a fintech insights company focused on building a knowledgeable infrastructure for fintech investors, executives, and professionals. Our competencies include payment switch, card, terminal implementation, payment infrastructure support, project management, technical sales, product strategy, and business development across sub-Saharan Africa. Finally, today on the panel, we have Nosakhare Oyegun, who has a diverse work experience spanning various roles and industries. Nosakhare currently works at Kuda as the VP of Product Innovation and Strategy, where they focus on developing innovative strategies for the company. Prior to this, they held roles at Kuda as Head of Retail Products and Partnerships, as well as Product and Partnerships Manager, contributing to the establishment of Nigeria's first digital-only bank. Nosakhare also co-founded CashAfrica, an event management solution, and eDrink Media, a hyper-local food blog. So thanks so much to all our panelists for joining us today. So this is how the event is going to run today. We're done with the presentations. We're going to have a keynote presentation for about 5 minutes from a member of the Fintech Association of Nigeria. Then we're going to briefly hear a brief report about this presentation on which our conversation today is going to be based. And then we'll discuss with the panelists for about 30 minutes and then reserve 30 minutes towards the end of this event for Q&A from the audience members. So that's the outline of how this webinar is going to go this morning. So I'd like to hand over to Elvis Ifekam, who is the country head CyberPay and also a member of the Fintech Association of Nigeria, for a brief keynote address. Elvis is going to be talking to us on the topic of the role of the Fintech Association of Nigeria in enabling innovation in Nigeria. Elvis?
Thank you so much, Kay. So my name is Elvis Ifekam. I'm the country head for CyberPay, and it's a pleasure to actually be here to give this keynote speech on behalf of the president of the association, Dr. Stanley Jacob, as well as the whole of Fintech NGR. So I wouldn't take much of your time. Let me just delve into the topic of the day. So basically, we have been able to contribute to the advocacy of some policy changes and also influencing it positively. We've also been able to ensure that fintechs collaborate, amongst themselves, so that whatever issues a particular fintech has actually been going through, you can share ideas, and at the end of the day, you are carried along. Then also, we've been able to set up some very community platforms where you can educate the public and also build capacity. And in advocacy and policy influence, we've been able to talk with the Central Bank of Nigeria, SEC, and some other regulators in terms of making policy changes, reviewing the policies that do not favor fintechs, because over the years you just see that the CBN gives licenses to people to run as a fintech, and a lot of times there are some policies that may come in that may not be in tandem with what the companies have been set up to do. When I mean companies, I'm talking about the fintechs. So the fintech NGR is there to actually ensure that as the policies are coming out, they're in line with whatever things that we have set up to actually achieve as an organization. We have also been able to support policies from the CBN, from other regulators with respect to digital payments, growing, deepening financial inclusion and extending it beyond what it is today. And over and beyond that, we've been able to also promote very competitive environment for the fintech ecosystem. At the end of the day, what this means is that there is proper transparency and there are good ethical practices within the fintech industry. Not that people are actually working in silos and churning out maybe products that are not world-class standards. So these are the things that we've done with respect to advocacy and policy influence. Then when it comes to collaboration and networking as well, there are so many partnerships we've actually groomed, so to speak. Then don't forget that we also host one of the biggest events in Nigeria, which is the Fintech Week. We do that on an annual basis. And as I speak with you, we have even extended beyond Nigeria to get the African Fintech Network, which is growing by the day with respect to the number of members. So over and beyond what we are doing in Nigeria, we're also extending, we are leading in terms of fintech in Africa, and we will keep showcasing the innovations, put proper visibility to what fintechs are doing, and also shaping strategic alliances when it comes to driving the growth of these fintechs. And lastly, I would, because I have, for lack of time, I would want to speak to the capacity building. So there are quite a number of communities that you can actually join to gain insights with respect to the skills that the fintech professional should have. We are promoting researches here and there with respect to fintechs. We are collaborating with some other entities to ensure that the resources that you need, the tools that you need as a fintech, is actually available for you to scale. So we're also supporting initiatives from startups, increasing financial literacy amongst the general public, so that our role as fintech Nigeria will be felt not just in Nigeria but globally. So in conclusion, I would like to say all this that we are doing, we will continue to work with the various regulators in the industry and ensure that whatever policies that are coming out, that there will be policies that are well fine-tuned to actually growing the fintech ecosystem in Nigeria, and would also impact positively to the startups, even the existing ones that are actually established. At the end of the day, we'll bring out grounded people, not just people in the fintech industry, people who the general public who actually listen in, joining to those communities to learn about fintech, as it were. So I want to say a special thanks to TechCabal for having us to come and give this keynote speech. And I want to thank the president of our association, which is Dr. Stanley Jacob, as well as every other person in the association that has actually contributed to the growth of fintech in Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elvis. Thank you very much for that presentation and sharing insights about the association's activities and its impacts in the industry. Now I'd like to hand things over to Jide-Ebeogu, who is the associate consultant from TechCabal Insights. Jide is going to walk us briefly to the report, and then we will start the conversation.
Thank you very much, Kay. Please give me a second to share my screen. All right. Once again, thank you very much, Kay. And thank you, everyone, for being a part of this today. In a few minutes, I'm going to give a bird's eye view of the Nigeria Payments Report 2025. I'm just highlighting our key findings from the research endeavor. But it's very important to also mention the objectives of this report, what led to TechCabal Insights developing this report for the payment ecosystem in Nigeria. One of our overarching objectives is to ensure that at the end of the day, we create an objective guide for investors, government, stakeholders in the payment space that they can use to understand the payment landscape and also prepare for the future, what's to come, and stay ahead of the curve. So we sought to do an extensive review of the e-payments industry, some of the innovation. We investigated the rise of AI, some disruptive technologies, as well as some of the challenges the payment ecosystem is currently facing. At a glance, we can see the key metrics driving the state of the digital payments in Nigeria. In the first half of 2024, the payment ecosystem recorded transaction value of about 1.56 quadrillion, which represented about 70% of the total figure recorded in 2023, which is a very sharp increase in terms of the volume of payments processed. In terms of the channels utilized, internet transfers continues to lead in terms of the volume and value, recording 828.05 trillion naira in 2024. Some of the other channels that make up the e-payment data include checks, ATMs, POS, as well as RTGs, USSDs, and mobile money operations. We also found out that mobile POS continues to dominate in terms of payment, and is projected to reach about 145.40 billion by the end of 2025. Looking at Africa's digital payments landscape, the market is also estimated to reach about 236 billion by 2025, growing at the cumulative annual growth rate of about 26.8% between 2025 and 2029. The market is also expected to reach about 611 billion by 2029. It's also worthy to mention that Nigeria leads the fintech ecosystem in Africa, with over 217 startups playing in the fintech space, while the fintech space also attracted about 140 million USD in funding in the first half of 2024. So these are some of the key metrics that highlights the events, what happened in the payments ecosystem in the year 2024. Please, the next slide. Okay, looking at some of the payment methods, it's significant to note that there was a notable decline in market share of cash. However, cash is still the predominant payment method across POS terminals across Nigeria. Interestingly, Nigeria is also one of the leaders in terms of countries who have moved away from cash to digital payments. However, cash is still going to be predominant in the year 2025, 2026, but will continue to record a decline as time passes. We see the adoption of electronic payment solutions has been accelerated since the COVID-19. Projections also indicate that it will continue to increase, digital payments will continue to increase as cash would decline across Nigeria. Next slide, prepare. Okay. Looking at the consumer landscape, we observe that there's rapid adoption of digital payment services, digital financial services, which is also contributing to financial inclusion in Nigeria. According to GSMA, we have over 856 registered mobile money accounts in Nigeria. About 136 million new accounts were registered as of 2023, and it represented about 76% of national financial inclusion. Undoubtedly, this growth is propelled by the advent of agent networks, which have been able to penetrate the last mile, the rural communities, and also ensure that these people have access to financial services. It's also important to mention that the regulators, CBN, have created an enabling environment for fintechs to thrive and for the payment landscape to continue to grow in this positive trajectory. The fintech market in Nigeria is expected to reach about 68 billion by 2025 and $154 billion by the year 2029, growing at a cumulative annual growth rate of about 23%, which shows that the market is propelled, is prepared for increased growth and adoption of these financial services. Next slide. Okay. Examining some of the growth drivers responsible for the transformation in digital payments in Nigeria. The mobile payment landscape experienced very significant growth in H1 of 2024. Transaction volume recorded was about 3.49 billion, which represented a value of 159.2 trillion naira in just the first half of 2024. It also was a significant increase from the 1.86 billion transaction volume that was recorded in the year 2022. We also see ecosystem players like NIBS also forging ahead and reporting about 11 billion NIB transactions in 2024, while we have POS transactions reaching 1.45 billion in the same year. The NIP channel dominated in terms of value, about 1.07 quadrillion, while POS also reached about 18 trillion. And we have mobile money transactions also surging ahead. Next slide, please, Barry. Okay, we're also seeing an observing maturity in the fintech ecosystem. Fintech now accounts for about 6% of the tech startups in Nigeria and recorded 42% of total tech funding between 2019 and 2023. Like I also mentioned, we have about over 217 fintech startups actively playing in Nigeria. Next slide, please, Akira. Okay. Looking at some of the innovation and technology also contributing to the advancement of the Nigerian payment ecosystem, we have some technology cool advancements such as artificial intelligence and machine learning also being unfolded in the industry. We have AI-powered fraud detection platforms. We also have AI tools being used to create personalized credit scoring, and some neobanks and alternative banks are also adopting AI to create personalized services for their customers. Something also important to mention is the advancement in interoperability and the open banking framework introduced by the CBN. We also have embedded financial services such as payment lending and insurance, as well as other as well as other services that are being woven into non-financial platforms. So embedded finance is also something to look forward to in the near future. We also have emerging technologies like agentic AI for payments. We're envisaging a situation where agentic AI will be deployed to activate or consummate payment transactions for customers without the customer manually going to consummate the transaction. Please, the next slide. Okay, moving forward, looking at the regulatory landscape, we have the PSV introduced by CBN also still taking effect and playing a key role in the regulatory sector. We also have the open banking framework and other compliance measures that were introduced by the CBN in 2024 to ensure consumer protection. Other advancements are also in cross-border remittances. We're seeing collaboration between PAPs and other stakeholders in the payment ecosystem to see how we can have a new rule for cross-border payments and ensure that intra-African trade is made possible in Africa. Lastly, our future outlook. Going into the future, we envisage that there is a need for continued focus on expanding access to digital financial services, which largely means that most of the fintechs will continue to focus on expanding access to digital financial services to underserved areas. We are also likely to see further innovation in payment technologies, and just like the agentic AI for payments I mentioned, and also embedded services. We also envisage increased collaboration between the players in the ecosystem and other stakeholders. The key takeaways for this report, we noted exponential growth is driven by innovation and the supportive regulations provided by the regulators. We also recorded that fintechs are the key drivers for the advancement in the payment ecosystem, coupled with their interfaces with the traditional banks. However, fintechs are also facing challenges in terms of funding and scalability as the ecosystem continues to grow. We also envisage some evolving regulatory events. We emphasize that there will be new regulations, especially in terms of cross-border settlements. And lastly, our path forward is that Nigeria's position to continue to lead Africa's digital financial transformation. So this pretty much sums up some of our insights from the report. Thanks, Victor.
All right, thank you so much, Adidayo, for those insights and sort of giving us a backdrop with which to start the conversation. I would like to add that the full report, the link to the full report is now in the chat, in the comments or chat room. So please click the link to download the full report so you can read and get into as much details about everything that Adidayo has discussed. Also, as we're about to begin the panel and the conversation, if you have any questions as the conversation goes along, you can put it in the Q&A section of the chat room so that we can get to it during the Q&A. Yeah, so I'd invite the panelists to please turn on their cameras so that we can begin. Thank you all again so much for being here. It's great to have you here to really discuss this report and sort of the insights that it brings to us about digital payments in Nigeria. I think the first question I wanted us to begin with is just some sort of context setting. We've come a long way in the evolution of digital payments. In the report, there's this interesting diagram that sort of begins all the way from when we're doing trade by barter and carry exchanges, and then goes all the way into the current time, 2020s. But I wanted to ask each and every one of you, what would you say has been the most defining shifts in that journey in the last 5 years? I don't know if you can begin.
Hi everyone. Mic check, can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool, awesome. Thanks to TechCabal for this session and platform, and interesting report as well, very detailed. Well done. Last 5 years, I think we were just on the brink of COVID 2020, and everybody was home, right? And if you didn't have your business online, as well as a way to collect monies from your customers online, you are basically toast. And then I think coming out from that, so that's, really defined things for digital payments. And we saw the reports from NIBS for that year, have a very definite uptick in internet payments, as well as mobile. Then I think towards the end of the year, that year, because I remember that was the first time my parents started asking me for a card, like, oh, this card thing, how can we get it? What are the disadvantages? We don't want to be hacked, that kind of thing. So we saw a lot of people trying to get cards, trying to download mobile apps, for the first time. And that's on the consumer side. For the enterprise side, or for the people that have service providers, my friends in operations, we are struggling with the volumes that they were dealing with. A lot of systems, if you can remember, punked. That's when a couple of people that had given attention to infrastructure, they are the ones that had most of the volumes, the new banks, and all of that. So I think those were very pivotal. From then, people now started having payments as a way of life, especially for the SMEs. You would see people say, oh, they have an OP account or they have a money point account in the market, and things just started going up from there. And that's what I would say, cash light and then COVID from my perspective.
Thanks, Iphie. Adidayo? Oh, sorry, Malik?
Thank you very much for putting this together. Like Iphie said, I think from my own point of view, right, the biggest shift has been this API-led ecosystem, right? In the past 5 years, we now have a lot of Nigerians and, the fintech ecosystem being able to say, oh, if I want to verify your identity, there's an API for that. If I want to collect money online, there's an API for that. If I want to access your bank, there's an API for that. So your bank data, there's an API for that. So there has been this shift, right, from, I need to visit a bank, I need to get to a bank, I need to get paid, from abroad by visiting a bank. So now I can say that, I can partner with UBA, issue you a UBA account because of an API, So there has been this massive shift to this API-driven model, right? And I think that's been instrumental to, a lot of the growth and, what even the fintechs, right, have been able to achieve, in the past 5 years.
Thanks, Malik. Francis?
Thank you, Kay. It's a pleasure to be speaking this morning with my other co-panelists. I think for me, I'm going to expand a bit more. I'm going to expand further from 5 years and what's happened. If you already, touched on what we saw during COVID, and Malik already mentioned that you have essentially an API for everything that you want to do today. For me, what has made all of this possible is a bit more foundational. If you look at it from an infrastructure lens, there's a time looking at it, in its bare parts. Payment is actually moving value from myself to some other person, moving value between two entities. And payment accelerates commerce. If I'm not able to pay for a service, the merchant is probably not going to release that to me. So digital payments as it is, so it just sort of makes this whole process very, very seamless and more efficient. And there have been a couple of initiatives, some of them regulatory led, that has got us up to this point. And I think one of the things I'm going to touch on will be our current account number system, the new bank system, as you see it. I'm not sure how many of us on this call know. If you take it back probably about 15 years ago, or even 13, 14 years ago, if you initiated an instant payment of funds transfer from yourself to a third party, there's a high chance that it could actually reach that third party or it could get to Mr. Joe that you were intending for it to get to. And the reason for that was because there wasn't any account number validation. You couldn't confirm who you were sending money to. You were sending it, putting your hands together and pray that it just gets to that final destination. So, having the sort of account number framing system that sort of got all financial institutions together to have a defined standard that NIPS could essentially use to identify beneficiaries for funds transfers, and all of that has led to the rise of, and I mentioned that the payment reports reported some X amount in quadrillions that has been transacted through NIPs. That has led to some of the shifts we're seeing, and it's not going to stop there. It's going to continue increasing. So for me, I think that's been one of the very defining moments for payments, as it were.
Thank you so much, Francis. That's very useful insights. Nosa, how about you? What would you say are the most defining, stops of that journey in the last 5-10 years?
So for the last 5 years, I would say that's like 2020. I'd say the growth of bank transfers as a means of merchant payments. Slowly flipping cards as de facto means of payments, because bank transfers have traditionally been like P2P or like BEAT or merchant, or what's it called, business to consumer. And in the last 2-3 years, there's been a lot of growth in bank transfers becoming like method for merchant payments. So you see it in virtual accounts online. When Paystack in their last thing talked about how Paystack Titan is like probably like their biggest channel in the last year. So that's like a big point. There's even growth of money point terminals, terminals that can accept bank transfers. Terminals have historically been like card acceptors, and money points innovating on that and introducing bank transfers, just like leveraging on the growth of bank transfers as a payment method for like merchant payments. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest shifts that I've seen and observed.
Thank you so much, Nosa. I think what I'm hearing sort of underlying a lot of the responses that I've heard is this sort of interconnectivity between, or this connection between sort of all the traditional banking systems that we used to have or that we're aware of, and then linking it to these newer fintech solutions that have been coming up over the last couple of years. So I did want to ask about interoperability as sort of a function and as a goal as it works right now. For all of you, how do you see that in practice in terms of these like highlights that you've all mentioned? And in your own opinion and in your experience, would you say that we are, as an industry, do we have a smoother interoperability between banks and fintechs and telcos currently? Is there room for it to be better than it currently is right now?
It's not an open question, or anyone could just take it.
Everyone could take it. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So I think for me, a whole lot has been done as it relates to interoperability. The industry has made a lot of strides. The fact that I can just go on my mobile device and initiate a funds transfer, and the recipient gets it within seconds is actually a true testament to how the industry has evolved over time. It would really be nice to see this replicated across other payment methods, such as card payments and the likes. The industry has advanced, but a whole lot more could still be done. That's my view. I don't think there's anyone, particularly if you're resident or domiciled in Nigeria, there's anyone on this webinar today who has tried to use their payment card at the merchant location and not gotten a dispute, a chargeback due to a network glitch. Like you've done the transaction, it debits you and you didn't get value. So it's now a tug of war between you and the merchant. Where's your money hanging and all of that. So this just sort of it just sort of highlights, what having siloed systems in a particular payment value chain, what some of the negative effects of that could be, and how interoperability could actually solve for that. It's one of the things at Zone we have solved for via decentralized blockchain-based switch. And I'm hoping probably at some point during this panel discussion, I should be able to shed some light on that.
I think, Francis really did cover, as a fintech founder, I'm solidly, unrelentlessly grateful for the interoperability that is able to happen in the ecosystem, right? A lot of fintechs, either at the beginning, right, do have to stand on the shoulder of these bigger banks, right? To be able to then build out the product, then as time goes on, you can talk about, going independent, but still, that interoperability, like Francis mentioned, is one of the biggest successes that we've seen, which is the NIP from NIT, right? To be able to, all these banks, even though there's a middleman, all these banks need to talk to each other, right? Unless NIP would not exist today. So that's a direct example as to, what, that interoperability can help us achieve, right? Looking into the future, right? I think a lot of people might not have grasped, the effect of open banking and the wave that is coming, right? In terms of, now that the CBN has given the green light, for August 2025, right? There's going to be a huge wave of, my restriction is no longer data. My restriction is no longer payment, right? My restriction is who should I offer my service to? And, that tends to spring a lot of innovation, right? Before a solar company, can even offer you, solar solutions, or whoever it is that has any product can directly, solve either do a check on you, check if you are the appropriate customer for their product or whatever it is. And so I think of course that is as a result of interoperability that the ecosystem enjoys, and may it always be so.
Amen to that. Nosa, I was going to ask you about interoperability specific to Kuda Bank. How does it, for you at Kuda, how does it drive, what does it mean for customer experience to be able to sort of have these systems talk to each other? And then in your experience as well, what barriers and what challenges do you still see, even with all the success that we've made so far?
So as far as like interoperability for Kuda, and in general, like for payments, I think as kind of like the other two guys have mentioned, interoperability as far as payments is concerned is more or less solved in Nigeria. Like there's no, like we mentioned the money point thing. A POS terminal can accept payments via a card, via a bank transfer, can do USSD, can do QR. So, and those are like all different rails, give or take. So Nibs has done a lot of work in like getting NIP to work, and like the other guys that are doing switches have done a lot of work in getting NIP to getting their switches to work. So as far as payments is concerned, I mean, it could be improved. You could get to like a UPI level, obviously. But I think as far as payments is concerned, we've done a lot. Where I think the opportunities lie is more from a data perspective. And that's where like open banking comes in. And it's good that CBN has finally like opened doors to it, because then you can do more interesting things. I know this is a payments conversation, but like you can do more interesting things with regards to like lending and whatnot. Like the example of the solar thing, like a solar person can give like financing at point of sale because they can access your data from like your different banks and they can make like an assessment. So there's a lot to be done there. And I think for us at Kuda, it's just kind of like looking and seeing how it pans out. So like now that CBN has kind of opened the doors and waiting to see which players come to the fore and see what new types of infrastructure can come into, like what does the next level of, say, a mono look like in this new regime? Like what can we build based on the infrastructure that they've built, that they've built? Because I believe a lot of the things that's kind of held it back. I mean, more obviously, you guys know Mono's not been a new company. They've been around for a while, but it hasn't been fully embraced by, say, all the banks, like the traditional banks, because there's always been that regulatory gray area and some compliance officers not wanting to touch because CBN hasn't officially blessed this. So now that it's blessed, is now what would be the new infrastructure that Mono builds? What would the traditional banks do, or even the banks, like even people like Kuda, what would we do to support like this new what's it called, new regime? Like, are we going to like standardize our APIs? Is it going to be easy for any, what's it called? Because like if you look at like more advanced like markets where like in England where they have like the PISP and the AISP regime, there's a lot more stuff. Like banks have to like display their uptime. Anybody, as long as your license, can come in and just like piggyback off your licenses. You can do a lot of things with regards to budgeting, all those like budgeting apps and whatnot. So those are kind of things that we would like to do, and they're things that have always been like in our roadmap. But it's always like, if I wanted to give a customer a one-stop view of their financial activity on the Kuda app, for instance, to give them like a better customer experience, I'm always limited by the fact that it hasn't always been fair game to get data from another bank. Like GTB is not openly sharing data, or there's no means for GTB to openly share my customer's transaction on GTB with me so I can build some fancy dashboard to create like this nice experience. But now that there's open banking that has been approved, there's going to be like a new set of or new type of infrastructure that's going to be built that allows like these use cases come to life without feeling like you're walking on eggshells and you're a regulator call away from getting shut down.
Okay, Thank you so much, Nosa. Iphie, I did want to ask, I don't know if you wanted to add something to the interoperability question, but I wanted to ask, as someone who has studied and documented extensively, in payments landscape, for you, what are the most under-discussed trends that are shaping the way people use consumer behavior and product design that you've seen in your years of really studying the industry? And would you say that
I missed the middle part
Sorry?
of your question. I missed the middle part of your question.
Oh, so I'm asking, what are for you, from your experience, what are the most under-discussed trends shaping consumer behavior and product design? So are you seeing innovation being driven more by consumer demand or more by infrastructure readiness? So what's that? How are you seeing that?
I would say it's a mix of the two. That's why I would have slightly wanted to disagree with the notion that we have solved interoperability, maybe from a provider perspective. But the question I would like to ask my friends, Nosa and everybody is, do your customers agree with you? You know, that let's step back a bit and define interoperability. Interoperability is wherever it is I have money, I can use it. I don't need to move my money into a certain state to make it usable. And I think customers have tried to solve that interoperability problem for themselves by amassing a number of apps. Why do we have all those apps on our phones in different? We have one that has a virtual account that allows us to do X, and the other has a virtual an account, a normal wallet, that allows us to do Y. And then we also get, more and more. We don't like those logos, really, right? We are downloading them because we need them, and then if any of them faffs or anything like that, we get another one just so that we are not embarrassed. And your regular consumer in Nigeria, maybe low to middle class, has a global expression. If it was before, I didn't need to buy Google subscription for anything. But right now I need to buy a Microsoft subscription, no matter how little my business is, or a Google subscription. So I will need a virtual card. And if I have a Verve card, for example, that will not suffice, even though my agents, I can interact, with them with the virtual card. So I see us solving that problem for ourselves by amassing too many things together just to make our daily payments work. If you're on the food apps and wallets fail for some reason, you have a card for that, but you have a wallet for some other thing. I also think from the provider side that interoperability, can be better without us having to sew a number of licenses together to achieve what we want to do. So you're into digital banking and you want to store customers' funds. Again, like Nosa said, without CBN knocking at your door, you need to have a deposit-taking license, right? Or at least a wallet, depending on how you want to interact. And then you find yourself knocking at many financial institutions' doors. And at some point, you just tell yourself, hey, let me go get a switching license so I can, connect directly and sleep at night and make my investors sleep as well. And then, you have to orchestrate something different for the PTSP world and for the PSSP world. And it's a lot of things. And then when you enter into the IMT also, you also need to get a license for that after doing it under the radar for a while. I see other, let's not go too far, other places in Africa, looking at all these capabilities and sewing them into one license and saying, hey, Francis, come take a license. Hey, Malik, come take one license. That one license has one compliance stream. It has one governance. Digital banking is like that in Egypt. You just get one license. You don't need to sew microfinance, PSP, and everything on top of it just because you want to answer a digital bank or you want to have the functions of a digital bank. Talking about interoperability also, we can't move away from how money flows in the background, how you're clearing money. You still need to submit to banks, and it's banks that, are at the clearing to make sure that your money goes smoothly. If you're a fintech, first few years, yes, you can, thrive with partnerships. But at some point, that the money comes quickly so that you can offer your merchants same-day settlement, you know, or even timed settlements, especially if they are investment kind of customers that need to bring out that they need to pay money at a certain stage. Either people are paying money to them or they are paying money when it liquidates, that kind of thing. You cannot rely on the operations as we know it today. You need to station money in some places just to make sure that your treasury is fine. Compare that with PSPs in South Africa that is just near us here. PSPs can go to clearing straight away. There are things that they also enable their PSPs to do that allow them to have access to liquidity. So that's 6 billion you're waiting to clear so that you can settle merchants and keep up with the obligations. You have a store of value that already allows you to do that. Again, our ecosystem has done really well, regulators and all, everybody working hard. But yeah, those are the places that we need to move the game to the next level because we are doing a lot, you know, here in Nigeria compared to what these other places are doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. We almost ran out of time, but I did want to ask Francis, from your perspective and sort of the work that you're doing at Zone, I wanted to ask, just give us a little bit of perspective about some of the foundational infrastructure gaps that your platform is addressing using decentralized technologies, and what gaps are they addressing? How do you see that solving issues with legacy payment systems?
Okay, so to respond to that, I'm going to pick a bit from what I'm going to pick up from where Iphie stopped, and just marry with what I have spoken to earlier. So when you look at payment, there are different elements for a typical digital payment scenario that need to be put together to ensure that a transaction can move from an originator to whoever is receiving it. You need to be able to initiate that payment. That payment has to be authorized. And after that payment has been authorized, an intermediary, so to say, maybe a clearinghouse or a switch, needs to ensure that a particular payment is cleared against the different institutions. And then finally, there can be settlement between both institutions. Essentially, what I'm saying is, if, say, for instance, I want to send funds to Malik, right? What my institution is doing is it's reducing my balance on its books, sending a notification to Malik's institution to apply that balance to him. It doesn't actually mean that funds have moved from my bank to Malik's bank, right? So more or less, Malik's bank is short of value and is trusting that my bank is going to ensure that that funds is going to move to him. Now, the first thing I had mentioned, sometimes this doesn't always happen that way, especially with card payments. You could carry out a transaction, you're debited, my institution believes it has communicated that but the destination institution hasn't gotten any value. So you have that block there. And this is something that Zone is solving for, right? Building for visibility and building for enhanced transparency between financial institutions, ensuring that a Kuda, for instance, can route the payments to a GT bank and can do this seamlessly without an intermediary sitting in between both of them. So that's on the one hand, that's on the application layer, ensuring that two individuals or an individual in the business can effect the payment in a way that provides better efficiency to both of them. The second one will be how funds are moved from my institution to the other institution. So today, the CBN has made its real-time gross settlement system available to financial institutions to be able to move funds at designated times during each workday and all of that. And as Iphie had mentioned, at some point as a fintech, there comes a time when the values of transactions and the volume of transactions that you're processing becomes significant. That value becomes very enormous, and you would require this process to happen almost instantaneously if need be, if possible, right? And this is something we're not there yet as Zoom, but this is something we're already solving for, working with key stakeholders in the industry to see, okay, we've been able to ensure authorization of payments can happen, but we are now also beginning to see how we can move, how we can facilitate the actual movement of value between institutions on chain. So what I mean is, in the initial scenario that I mentioned, where a Kuda bank customer was sending money to a GT bank merchant or customer, we can ensure that both institutions can also confirm that they have received value in real time. It's something we're working for, and it's one of the promises of decentralized technology. So to summarize, right now we have done this, and we can ensure that two individuals, or an individual and a business, can transact without any issues, but to ensure that the institutions, and this is actually what underpins interoperability from an infrastructure standpoint, that the institutions can also receive value and are not out of pocket for too long. It's something that we are current. It's one of the promises that our decentralized technology holds.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Francis. Malik, I did want to come to you because also there's a question in the chat room that is sort of, it's not where I was coming at with my question. But that is really about the work that you do with Tap to Pay. And the question I had really was in sort of so far with your activities and initiatives to drive its adoption, what would you say are some of the challenges with just getting people to, subscribe to this new mode or this new type of payments?
I think, just top of the list is trust, right? So a couple of people have tried to build contactless, right? Kudos to them. But the reason why, it has not taken up in Nigeria is that trust factor, right? If you are tapping to pay in San Francisco today, you do not need a PIN, right? So, for example, Providence Bank, replicating that model, right, with MasterCard and bringing it to Nigeria. The average Nigerian, right, according to data, wants to authorize even transactions as low as 50 naira. So replicating models like that, has caused a gap. Nigerians are very secure with their money, right? They are very, very, so one thing that we've done differently at CashAfrica is we've shipped a mobile first contactless solution, right? Our infrastructure includes authorization, right, as part of your interaction with contactless. So when you tap to pay, nobody can fundamentally just pick up your phone and withdraw money or debit your account, right? That sort of gives attention to the trust factor, right? The other side of that is, of course, user behavior, right? Thankful for as the report stated, right? There's now 76% banking penetration, right? That means that people are beginning to move away from what does online bank even mean, right? So, so that awareness, right, that user education is going up, like the report stated, mobile first payment is exploding, right? 79 trillion, right, in mobile first payment for 2024. So that means that as time goes on, right, payment is no longer seen as magic, right? It is now seen as, if you can't do transfer, we have a couple of merchants in Nigeria today that say, if you can't do transfer or card, right, I can't sell you goods, right? I do not take cash anymore, So just that trend, right, continues to grow, right? And that really serves contactless because contactless is so close to the ceiling of how payment should be worldwide, right? And today we have infrastructure that actually supports both Android and iOS, right? That interoperability, like Francis mentioned earlier, is important because for contactless to occur, you need to, of course, juggle settlement between multiple partners, the person that is tapping to pay, the merchant that is receiving that payment, but the trust factor, right, and of course, the user education are some of the biggest points. But I think how we address it is, by providing our authentication in our infrastructure itself, right, the user authentication, and also, just taking the products to the masses, right? A lot of demos, in-person experiences for people to be like, oh, okay, this is really magical, it really does go through in 1 second, right? So those two merging together are sort of the ways that we address some of the biggest, headaches.
All right, thanks, Malik. I want to remind everyone that as we sort of ease into the Q&A, if you have any questions, please leave them in the Q&A section of the chat box so that I'll be able to get to them. Currently, we have 2 questions. I want to ask one question of all the panelists, and then we can go into the Q&A since we have 2 questions for now. So let's see if more will come in while we do sort of answer this question. And the question I wanted to ask to everyone on the panel is sort of looking ahead. There's a lot of new technology that's coming in, and people are trying to see sort of how we incorporating this into, moving us ahead and moving us into the future. One of it, of course, is artificial intelligence. So I wanted to ask everyone on the team, based on your experience and based on sort of what specific things and solutions and products that your companies are offering consumers, how do you see AI transforming what you're doing? So whether it's in fraud detection or lending, personalization, how are you deploying it? How are you seeing it being adopted? What do you want to see in terms of just how these new advanced technologies move the payments industry forward?
Awesome. So for AI, right, specifically for an infrastructure provider, I think our focus is basically fundamentally around security, right? And some of the data from the report that TechCabal just released is that the value of POS transactions, right, for 2025 is about 49 billion, right? Now, MasterCard was able to save, according to the report, 35 billion, right, in cyber attacks, $35 billion. That means that, this is substantially up to 70%, if not more than 70% of the total POS transactions in Nigeria, right? Being 49 billion, right? And MasterCard is able to save with AI detection tools and cybersecurity tools, that are AI driven, according to the report, $35 billion, right? So that shows the importance of AI to an infrastructure provider, right? It can make or break, the whole ecosystem that, digital payment sits upon. So from our own point of view, we take AI very serious in terms of, assessing risk, right? Trying to sort of match, authorized tokens and, the way we communicate in the back end as to what transactions, appear illegitimate or what transactions are originating from unknown IPs and, stuff like that is really where, an infrastructure provider, AI really is, is a superpower, I think.
Thank you, Malik. Francis?
All right. So for us, what we've been, as some of us on the call may already know, Zone is a blockchain payment infrastructure that currently facilitates payments. But in our evolution, we're also looking to see how we can begin to support digital assets as well for cross-border transactions. And underpinning this will be or what drives every blockchain network, every blockchain system is a smart contract where you can sort of ensure you can encode rules within the smart contract, and this can facilitate whatever outcomes it is that you expect between the two counterparties in a particular transaction scenario. As we begin to evolve, when we talked about us moving payments from a settlement perspective, we want to move this on chain. This is going to enable us solve for domestic as well as cross-border use cases, and that's why I touched on digital assets. It will become very important for us as we begin to move from one corridor to the other beyond Nigeria, that we need to be able to track and monitor user behavior as well as changing regulations across corridors. And this is something we're looking to do, utilizing artificial intelligence agents to ensure that in real time we can sort of track this and have it, bring this integrated with what we currently do with smart contracts today to facilitate payments. It's something we're currently working on, is still in development, but I think that it really holds a lot of promise for us.
Thank you, Francis. Nosa, did you have something to add?
So in terms of like AI, I think at Kuda we're very bullish on AI. So in terms of applications and how we see it, it's more about things that were not scalable because of operational issues in the past, leveraging AI to kind of give you that extra muscle. I mean, because I guess on an individual level, I'm guessing most of you guys on the call, everyone uses AI, and you can see how much of a force multiplier it is as far as your own individual productivity, especially when you know the context, you know what you're working with. So, and we see that as one of like the big benefits in like improving operation. So like a good one example is like engineers working with AI, like to speed up like their outputs. Like I'm sure we all know Windsurf, we all know Cursor. One relevant application is even on our customer service desk at Kuda. There are certain levels of tickets or certain levels of inquiries that are end-to-end handled by like an AI agent. Like things like checking transactions or somebody saying, I did this transfer. What's also called, the person hasn't got it. Like an AI agent can get the context, get the information, can look up the transfer and tell the customer of the status. Back to the whole point about operational efficiencies, because in the past, as we grow and as we have more customers, you have a lot of those kind of inbounds. And the natural thing would have been to add more headcount so you can address all the types of inbound. But like with AI, we see that we can deploy agents to handle this, like, I guess, low level tickets so that the more complex things are reserved for like humans. So that's like something that we do at the moment. And there's just a other bunch of use cases, like because the premise is very simple. It's like we've seen incredible impact on our individual selves using AI, just being more efficient and being able to like output more work than ever. And on the personal level, for like even like the support agent, they can we can have like custom bots that can like query like our help center and pull up a question, can do like little debugging, or just can like help even framing like language or framing responses to be more polite, that kind of thing. So we're really, really bullish and like very into it. So yeah, that's kind of how we see it on our side, and just in terms of just making us more efficient operationally.
All right, Nisa, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights. I'm just going to get into some of the Q&A, some of the questions we have in the Q&A chat room. There are not many of them yet, but one person is asking, Nyambura is asking, what challenges did you face with fraud and how did you solve them? I'm guessing this is for everyone on all the panelists who are working with fintech startups. What challenges do you face with fraud and how do you solve them or address them?
I guess from my side on Kuda is, I'm sure most people that are in the industry are aware of like bank glitches that have been happening a lot, like the last couple of months. So now on our side, there's definitely fraud has kind of grown in the last couple of months. And as fraud grows, your transaction monitoring has to be like top notch. But with transaction monitoring and stricter controls comes lots of false positives. So like, how do you manage what is a valid transaction and what is a fraudulent transaction? Especially in our market where behaviors are not quote unquote rational. Like, and like something that could be like, is a common sense fraud vector or common sense fraud trait could be someone doing a normal thing, like switching devices, for instance. You will be surprised how many people switch devices in a day, in a month, or whatnot. But that's also a very similar pattern of behavior to account takeovers. So you kind of have to like strike a balance. And I think that's kind of one of the biggest challenges, is like knowing what is legitimate activity and what is not legitimate activity, because you can protect yourself easily if you just went all the way strict, but you would also be punishing your customers. And they'll be like upset, and that leads to like churn and people just not happy. So it's just striking the right balance between being alert and protecting your system, but at the same time not being customer unfriendly. I'll say that's like one of the biggest challenges, or bigger challenges, that I don't want to say that we have a solution for it, because it's still like work in progress.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nasa. Before Malik and Francis, before you go on, I just want to share with the audience that a poll, will be launched in the chat room now by our team members. Please quickly complete the poll. It's just to sort of get a sense of your experience of this webinar to help us better refine future ones. Thank you so much. So Francis, over to you. How do you handle fraud at Zone, and how do you deal with fraud? How do you solve or at least handle it if it's, I wouldn't say that fraud is ever completely solved.
Yeah, so Zone's market approach, we serve financial institutions. We have a B2B market focus. So I would say from a traditional understanding of what fraud means, we haven't really, first of all, I would say we haven't had that much or even at all any occurrences of fraud being executed on our systems. We essentially provide the rails that ensures a Kuda can transact with a GG Bank, with a cash out, and different other financial service providers. What we do, however, is to ensure that beyond just having an infrastructure network that allows financial service providers to transact with each other, we also go a step further to ensure that we can define rules across the network and enforce the implementation with our network participants, that is different financial institutions on our network, to see how we can minimize or even curtail these occurrences or fraud that usually is impalatable for anyone. Internally with our systems, we are also very compliant with different ISO standards as it relates to how we handle data, as well as having our own fraud monitoring tools. So this is as far as it goes with fraud management with Zoom.
Thank you, Francis. Malik?
Yes, I think on our own platform, the biggest example of fraud we've seen is transaction origins, right? Just like Francis said, fraud can be quite, can come from different angles. Sorry, like Nosa said, fraud can come from different angles, and you need to be able to. I think transaction origins has been something where you can, at 3 a.m., you can see somebody trying to access an API from Kogi State, right? And you're wondering what's going on in Kogi State and which of our clients. So one thing that we do is to have IP signing, right? Where, every API can only be accessed by whitelisted IP addresses, right? Meaning that, it is practically impossible, right, for, somebody to access services that have been dedicated to a bank from, another location or another IP address, right? But even that's also, like I said, fraud comes from multiple angles. That also, creates the exposure on what if the device, with the IP is also, stolen or, misplaced. But, I think, fraud is quite continuous, right? And the best way that, we try and apply that philosophy is to, if need be, detect on time and, fix in the shortest possible window, because it's almost impossible, especially when you're operating from a fraud-sensitive environment like yeah.
Okay, I'd like to add to that.
Go ahead.
Awesome. So yeah, I just want to put something on what everybody has said. If you notice, most of the large amount of the frauds that have large numbers attached to them, if you're trying to investigate how these things were able to scale through, you'll find that the biggest loopholes or the biggest enablers were internal. And then part of the problems with internal staff collaborating is most of the times it's not very malicious. It's a lack of knowledge, right? We all know that we have friends, allies, colleagues, whatever it is, that have left the country en masse and left with the wealth of knowledge that they've garnered, from fintech all over the years, leaving their portfolios with people that, don't know so much. and there's no university in Nigeria, where you can have a master's or a bachelor's in fintech or in risk management or something like that. And it's one of the things we are actively solving at the PaymentLogue, where our focus is on practical fintech knowledge. I remember when we launched our engineering course last year, where we were figuring out how to build secure wallets, and some of the conversations from developers, because you need to be a developer already, to enter that class, was, I didn't know that this kind of thing, solves idempotency, where you have transactions multiplying in a wallet and it's not supposed to be. You're firing a transaction once, it's crediting a wallet multiple times because you have not done the thing, you need to do in the background. So apart from just going to structured learning, one of the ways to solve it is also to make sure that people know as much as they need to, so that they are not inactively or unconsciously collaborating with people internally to make transactions go through that are fraudulent.
Well, thank you so much, Iphie, for that context. This other question, I think Malik has touched on a little bit, but somebody's asking about, why don't we have contactless solutions enabled, especially Apple Pay and Google Pay? Those require PINs, biometric authentication before payments. Do you see that kind of system coming to Nigeria soon? I mean, that already exists to some degree, Malik, but I don't know if you had any more context to lend to this person's question.
Yes. So fundamentally, Apple Pay and Google Pay is what we do at CashAfrica, right? So if you want the direct replica of what exactly is Apple Pay and what exactly is Google Pay today, right? CashAfrica has that to offer, right? Meaning that you can tap to pay from either your iOS device, your iPhone, or your Android device, right? If Apple themselves would come to Nigeria, right, would only be answerable to by Apple, right? Another thing is, is the ecosystem mature enough for them? Because Apple Pay rides on cards, right? Cards is one of the most unstable payment channels, right? In Nigeria today, like Francis said, everybody has faced one sort of dispute with card or the other, right? And Apple Pay solely relies on cards. So that means that, Apple is able to look, Apple Pay and Google Pay solely relies on cards, right? They're able to look into the ecosystem from the outside and say that, will this just be a lot of Apple Pay transactions failing, thereby affecting or impacting the brand that Apple Pay does not work in this part of the world, right? So that's one thing that CashAfrica has built upon, right? So we have taken it a step further to build contactless for iOS and Android in one single API. And of course, we route via A2A switching, like the report said, which is, the infrastructures like NIP or, an in-house switch, that is way more reliable for the market. Just that local knowledge being applied to a global product in order to make it succeed.
All right, thank you so much, Malik. There's another question here. I think it's maybe the last question that we can take because we're almost at time. But Mercy Adeni is asking, how can we bring some pressure to bear on the licensing authorities to be creative and issue new licenses that are relevant to niche fintechs? Is anyone able to speak to this in terms of licensing and niche fintechs?
Yeah, I think what's it called? I know if you kind of touched on this earlier, the initial thing with licensing. I think is it Egypt or South Africa, the one that has like the one fintech license?
Yes,
Yes.
you mentioned Egypt.
Egypt has one digital banking license.
Yeah, so I mean that could be something that could be done in Nigeria. Although I think it's a bit tricky. My personal opinion is I don't think we've reached, or I don't think there's anything anyone is trying to do currently that doesn't fit into a particular license bucket. But this is just my personal opinion. I might be wrong, but because I give or take, there are things based on definition of what you want to do. There's a license for you. Now, what is the problem, or maybe it's not a problem, is the barriers to get that license are a bit steep by design. Like they filter out many types of people from getting those licenses. Because you look at it, if you're doing a wallet, there's an MMO license. If that's really what you wanted to do, like a pure payments play. Like there's, if you wanted to be a bank, but at a smaller level, there's a microfinance license. Although, I mean, it's a bit old school in terms of like the geographical expectations of microfinance licenses. There's a traditional bank license and all of that. I don't think there's anything particularly novel in our market that demands a new type of license. I would say what kind of is the big sticking point is, one, I think there are lots of people trying to get into the business. I just don't know. Like there's like a knowledge. I don't think that lots of people know what's out there. That's one. And two, it's just the barriers to entry. And it's not a case of, if you were a regulator, would you make it easier for anybody to start in this environment? Or would you try to have some sort of filter to at least maintain sanity in your space? That's, I guess, I'll leave that question to like other people to answer. But I don't think there's anything that requires like a unique license. I'm personally not a fan of quote unquote fintech. I think fintech is just a broad categorization, but you're either a bank or you're a payment service provider or something else. Is the whole thing of being quote unquote they are a fintech. I don't think you need a fintech license.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that if you don't mind. And I agree very much with what Nosa has said. You know, the thing is, as you know, as digital payments has evolved, even the current licenses, if you're a payment service provider, the current licenses that most of us have had to operate with, wearing there more than 10 years ago. The CBN had to sort of design these licenses in response to, you know, operators who wanted to do more, who were very innovative and wanted to take their products to market directly, as opposed to having to operate as technology service providers to the traditional banks as you have at the time. And what you have seen is you have entities who are beginning to do a whole lot of creative things with these licenses. And at some point when they feel, okay, they want to also begin to domicile balances from different customers, and they then go ahead to get a banking license. I think the way I see it is the more you decide to do, the more you decide to take on, the more regulatory scrutiny is going to be on you, right? If you decide to say you want to go from the realm of just offering payments, you want to begin to offer maybe a stablecoin play, you want to begin to offer banking and all of that, there's going to be more scrutiny. I mean, me, for instance, just looking at myself outside of the payment industry as an individual, I would want to know that any entity that comes to sell themselves to me as they can provide XYZ range of services to me, I would want to know that they have the requisite scrutiny and oversight. The regulator has oversight over the operations and what they're doing today. I mean, it's something we see. We still have a whole lot of people today among our populace that will still be comfortable banking with traditional banks today, as opposed to it's a thing, right? It's a thing. It's something we see that we want to, and the reason for that is there is this notion as to, okay, with a traditional bank, I know that there's more scrutiny on them, you know, of sorts and all of that. May not be true because it's still the same regulator that is regulating everyone, whether you're a fintech or whether you're a traditional bank. So if I was an operator and I was looking to, as an operator, or if I was looking to go into market with something new, I think I would rather even prefer that there was just a license that captures what I was looking to do and I can go to market quickly with, as opposed to listing out several other things, some of which may not even be ready from my own standpoint, and I'm asking for an umbrella license that caters to all of it. But this is just my own personal opinion, what I think. I think from a licensing standpoint, Nigeria has done very well. Of course, it could be, you know, maybe like some speakers have proposed that it could be, you know, an all-encompassing license. But I also do believe that with having this sort of license, there would likely be other barriers, maybe in terms of capital requirements or scrutiny that we put in place for it to take that.
Okay.
I'd like to speak
So
to that.
we're almost out. We're almost
Yeah.
out of time, so make it very quick.
Okay, so yeah, I hear your thoughts, Nosa and Francis. I hear your thoughts. There are some other things I would like us to consider, that have been itching us for a while, and sometimes I look at it, it doesn't make any sense. But it doesn't make any sense. But I know the regulator has done so much, right? Yes, we berated the regulator a lot on social media, but the truth is that the industry before they came, before EMV, before Nuban, before fraud, before insisting on a second layer authentication for online transactions, like a lot has been done. There are some areas that are very frontal to our operations, as evident in the reports, like the POS part, that I think would benefit from some refinement, not just maybe fundamentally changing it. For example, why is it that if you take a POS to an agent's location, you need a different license? And if you take that same POS to a merchant's location, you need a different license? Let's solve those kind of things like almost immediately. There are other things like that if you get the PSSP license, your definition of merchant, your segment is just online. You can't give POS to those guys, right? If you start looking at POS, you need to go and get a PTSP license, except you have a switching license, and then the PTSP comes with it. But we all know that when you are engaging a merchant, the merchant looks at you, can you give me in-store? Can you give me online? And in-store also means that you also need to provide POS for the person. Can somebody look at these offerings and say, if you want to do this kind of thing, take this license, and let be able to do all these things, together? Those are the kind of thoughts I have as I engage with clients. I'm just wondering why we need to tell them to sew a couple of capabilities together, or you would say, yes, you can attack this community or engage this community with POS. However, don't enter a banner if it's there, or don't enter the filling stations if it's there. Don't enter Mega Chicken. You can't give them POS because they are not amongst the kind of people you can give POSs to. Just agents under umbrella. I'll hand over to Malik.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Nosa mentioned, right, that just to do a service to the founders, we might not really agree with, would be that the notion that there's nothing that can be built that would not fall within the category of the licenses that exist, right? Because of course the old definition of innovation or disruption is to find new ways to do old things, right? So in the process of that disruption, there is the possibility that you fall outside of the license category, right? Or you experience some ambiguity. I think one of the things that the CBN has done that I would commend, but I would also mention that maybe they can do better with, is the regulatory sandbox, right? The CBN actually does have a regulatory sandbox where they are fundamentally saying, come to the CBN, whatever crazy thing you are building, right? Come and test it out with our team. There's no limits on what you can do or how you can do it, right? Before we then proceed to solve, put you in a box of, okay, this is where you fall in. And of course, the regulatory sandbox itself, would influence the sort of licenses that are available, for companies that are live in production. So I think maybe they can do better publicity in terms of, that regulatory sandbox. A lot of fintechs do not know that it exists. So the regulatory sandbox can really answer a lot of questions as to building something that might not fall under a particular license category. And of course, if you were saying, which license am I to collect, and why can I collect this and not this, and why do I have to collect multiple, and the regulatory sandbox can directly influence a lot of decision making at an executive level.
All right, Malik. Thank you so much. We are 2 minutes out of time, and so I will just try and wrap this. I wish we had more time. There's a lot to discuss, but thank you so much, Malik, Nosa, Francis, and Iphie for being here. Thank you so much to our audience for joining us this morning, late morning, afternoon for this session. Again, this event was produced in partnership with Zone. and the Fintech Association of Nigeria. We want to thank both organizations for working with us on this webinar. Please remember to download the full reports. The link is in the chat room so that you can read and sort of really go into detail. Like our panelists have said, the report is very detailed, presents a lot of really good insights and rich insights about the payments landscape in Nigeria. So please download and read, and then complete the poll, the event poll that is also up on your screen, so that you give us a better sense of your experience of this event, and we can always make future ones better. And also, if you are not, do subscribe to the TechCabal daily newsletter. Like I said earlier, it's this daily newsletter that we send out. It covers every important news detail about tech and innovation across the African continent. So subscribe so you get that in your email inbox every morning at 7 a.m. West Africa time. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you to the TC Insights team for putting this together. And thank you so much to our panelists and sponsors or partners for making this event possible. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.